Anyway, I'll show you the original post, and I'll show you what was correct about the original post and why it should be defended and affirmed over and against the people that are trying to attack it. So, you know, as many of you know, we're Marxists over here. We're communists. I've been getting into a lot of this. And what does that actually fucking mean? And I'm going to make it simple for you, right? But first of all, there was an interesting tweet. It wasn't interesting. I've actually seen this tweet a million times in different forms, different variations. It goes, is there a secret science that bridges all science, right? That's the tweet. And then this person who doesn't like us, for whatever reason, I think there's some PSL people just don't like us because we're a bunch of woman-hating misogynists. Because I'm a bearded, hairy, the hairy thing, I don't know if that matters, but I'm a Arab man, Taliban style, with a beard, who very much doesn't wear a dress and speaks in a certain way and has a certain sense of humor and walks and conducts himself in a certain way. And that means I am just the primordial enemy of these people. I don't know. I'm their antichrist, basically, right? And I could be as rational and reasonable with these types as one could be, and it will not matter because someone who sounds as I do, just the tone of my voice, the vocal inflections, whatever you have it, somebody who looks as I do, someone who has my temperament and my disposition, a priori, they just reject the premise that this is what a communist can be like. Even though I probably am, I've met old communists, I've met many communists around the world, and they all have my temperament and my disposition, and they're just like me in terms of, like, you know, the vibe I give, you know, or whatever. And very few of them, there's the only ones who are the soft, you know, male feminist type, I don't know, the type that are like wearing glasses and scarves and shit. Those tend to be Western ones. And I'll be nice to them for sure, but you know, they're not, they don't represent what communists have always been, right? Communists historically were just like me. And this bothers these type of people for some... And I'm not the one who has a problem with someone who wears glasses and has a scarf or crosses their legs at the cafe or whatever these fucking people do. But they have a fucking problem with me because it's like, they're like, this gorilla, this ape shouldn't be allowed to be repping communism. And then I'm like, who the fuck are you to gatekeep anything, you piss ant? Who the fuck are you? You're a nothing! The entire era where your type, your specimen, has come to dominate our movement. It's funny because it seems like I'm ranting against this person in their tweet, which I'm not. I'm just kind of ranting about how people who would otherwise agree with us have a fucking problem with us for such a stupid reason, right? Tanky, what's up? But it's like the era where communists were successful was the era they were more like us and more like me, right? And I don't know, there's an ACP vibe. Like Black Redguard posted something where he's like, the real working class are playing basketball and they're in the ghetto. They're not in vegan cafes and they're not sipping, I don't know, some kind of hipster stuff. He was like kind of, you know, he does that thing. He's attacking the white millennial types. And then somebody kind of responded because someone posted out of context, like, oh, did someone from ACP write this? So we give off this vibe that is just not even based on, it's not right wing, left wing. It's not even that. It's like, because in that piece, the implication was that black people are the real workers, right? But the fact that we're kind of demeaning this like sissy hipster, I don't fucking know. I don't know what to call them. I don't have the words. I'm sorry. And I don't have a problem with these people by nature. I'm so nice to them. If they're nice to me, I'm nice to everybody. I'm very chill. I'm a very chill guy. I don't judge people either. I'm not a judgmental person. But for some reason, they have an issue with me. You understand? You see how it's like a one-sided beef? Like, I saw this guy, I read a comment on TikTok once, which was like so true. He's like, there's like a guy who's like 6'5". He's like, you know, my father always told me there's a war between short men and tall men, but the tall men don't know about it. It's like, well, I mean, as a short guy, I guess I'm in the crossfire, but it's so true. It's just like so true. It's like a one-sided beef, right? Because if you're tall, why would you give a fuck, right? And then it's like the same thing with me, though. It's like with these people who like wear glasses, it's like there's this one-sided problem they have with me, whereas I am extremely indifferent toward them. I'm a big fan of, well, I'm not a big fan, but, you know, I don't have any problem with women who are effeminate. None at all, actually. And you know, as for these males, to you know, I don't want to how should I say, like, impose, I guess. I mean, it's like to each their own. If they want to be like this, they can do so. If I have kids, I'm not going to teach my kids to talk that way and speak that way, and I just kind of like have this kind of like accent where we're talking about like it's just like it's each their own, right? As Halali says, life goes on, right? But I guess what I'm trying to say is that it's like a one-sided beef. They just have this pathological issue with me that doesn't even make sense. It doesn't even make sense to me, you know? And I just wanted to say that before I agree, or I don't want to even seem like I'm defending this person. I don't know who they are. I'm not really defending them as much as I'm attacking the retards who are crashing out over what she said. So, it's like, is there a secret science that bridges all science, right? And then she goes, dialectical materialism is confirmed by literally every scientific discovery as the only consistent method of understanding reality and can only be refuted by religion or superstition. A scientist who is not a communist is a living contradiction. So that's true. That's very true. I don't think this person is smart enough to understand why that's true. I think maybe they're coming at it for, I don't want to be presumptuous. I wouldn't infer that they're smart enough to understand why this would be true. But I could say that this is true. And I would even say that I don't know if it can be refuted by religion. I think, you know, it's really heavy on the superstition, heavy on the metaphysics, heavy on the copium, heavy on the jibber jabber, right? And that's true. I mean, dialectical materialism is the thing that bridges everything because, hey, what's my favorite word of the year? It's the only cosmic perspective. Dialectical materialism is really a type of cosmos-oriented thinking. Cosmos, I love that word so much. Cosmos. I love the word cosmos because it's like cos and then mos, right? And it's like there's this resonance in that word that I love because that's what it is. That's what cosmos is. Cosmos is this kind of order that's based on relationality. It's based on an interrelation of opposites, right? Or apparent opposites. So that's what dialectical materialism is. It's a cosmos-oriented outlook. It's a cosmic type of thinking. And it is absolutely the thing that bridges all science. But then I saw a really filthy, hideous, disgusting comment, which was so disgusting, I just, I do, you know, in these right-wingers say, you want to throw me in a gulag? And it's like, it depends on your class background, to be honest. But I do think people like this should be thrown in a gulag. Like, this person doesn't deserve to have rights. This person doesn't deserve to be treated as human. This person doesn't deserve to be walking amongst us as a human being. This person doesn't deserve to have an opinion. This person doesn't deserve to open their mouth in public. This person doesn't deserve. This is a fucking infidel. This is a kufr. Kufr. Islamically, kufr. These are infidels. These are disbelieving infidel scum. And I hate them. You are an infidel. You don't believe in Marxism. You think Marxism is a supplement and a justification for some Neil deGrasse Tyson Reddit ideology. It's disgusting. It's hideous. This person asserts dialectical materialism as the thing that integrates all sciences into one outlook. Absolutely true. This person is soying out over that because it's unscientific and it's not neutral and it's contaminating science with ideology. And burn these infidels in a video game, right? Because you're a fucking infidel. You don't believe in communism. You don't believe in cosmos. You don't believe in the cause. You don't believe in the revolutionary cause. You believe in Neil deGrasse Tyson. The smart part of this has not begun, by the way, right? I'm just kind of rhetorically explaining my anger and frustration. But in any case, I will... Okay, for those of you who want a more... What am I kidding? Anyway, guys, I'm not crazy. For those of you... I'm not going to... Why am I talking so formally? Because I'm a professor, right? Listen, for those of you that would like me to explain this better, what I mean by this infidel thing and this disbeliever, like what's the kernel of truth in that? Well, it's that these people don't recognize Marxism as a distinct outlook from whatever acceptable, institutionally sanitized ideology, they can get away with having without the glasses wearers looking at them like, you can't do that. It's like there's this knee-jerk reaction of bourgeois institutionalism where if you go outside the bounds of conventionally accepted philosophy of science, you're considered a nut job. And in terms of your status, you are classified in the same category as like an actual homeless schizophrenic. And that's what Marxists should aspire to be. What do I mean by that? Let me qualify that. If you're a real Marxist, you don't mind being in the same boat as a homeless schizophrenic because you understand that epistemically and in terms of humanity, everyone is equal. There are no hierarchies of status when it comes to legitimate versus illegitimate aspirations toward truth. All human beings are truth seekers. They seek truth. They are entitled to do so by virtue of being human. You can't gatekeep scientific inquiry itself and box certain... this is an unacceptable line of inquiry. This is an unacceptable philosophy of science. No, for all intents and purposes, everything is equal and it should be on the same plane. And the only thing that should make a difference are the results. So I don't mind being equal in the eyes of these academic institutions to a homeless schizophrenic. I'm confident enough that my path is going to be distinct from that of the homeless schizophrenic. So I don't worry that I'm going to become the same thing as them in terms of raving on the sidewalk and yelling. But I don't have the validation and legitimation that academic institutions confer on these limp-wristed, soyified, low-testosterone little bitches like this person that they so dearly depend upon and rely upon just to have the fucking confidence to open their mouth about anything, right? If you're a Marxist, you think that we're all on an equal playing field in terms of our ability to ask questions and to partake in scientific inquiry, right? And I'm really disgusted by this knee-jerk reaction, these disgusting, filthy, left-com, infidel, heretic, Marxoids, whatever you fucking call these disgusting infidels, what else can you call them, have to... you know how there's the strong anthropic principle? I would say there's a strong Marxism. they have a knee-jerk reaction to strong Marxism, right? They believe in a kind of soft Marxoidism, where Marxism is basically just this thing that is meant to confirm and submit to and align itself with prevailing institutional academic paradigms, outlooks, and things that are just conventionally accepted by the hegemony within society, right? Oh, no, Marx agreed with empiricism. No, Marx was a positivist. No, Marx, he was an empiricist. He agreed with empiricism, right? No, trust me. Marxism really, Marx affirmed the multiverse theory. No. Marx would never question a big pharma and Pfizer. He would, no, trust me, Marxism is just like this way of we could just bow down to the fucking, prevailing institutional science without having any kind of critical distance whatsoever, right? Yeah, so that's this type of person, and every people, they try to call me right wing or something, and they try to say this, they try to say that. My problematic characteristics come from these types of people, and I'm looking for a pattern. You know, if the pattern was that, I don't even know if I should say this. Should I say this? I don't want to say it. I'm not going to say it. But it's like, that's the reason I'm a problematic person. It's because I see these are the enemies of communism with a capital C. These are these disgusting, filthy, sockdem Marxoid people, Frankfurt schoolers or some shit. And it's like, I don't know why I feel like I should be anti-Semitic about it, because these people aren't even Jews. But I've been so brain rotted by the internet that it's like the Alex Jones knee. But you see, like, even the fact, like, even an instinct like that doesn't come from me being right wing. It comes from me having an intense, like, animosity toward whatever the fuck this is, right? Toward this, like, institutional whatever. And it really isn't a Jewish thing. It really isn't. But for some reason, there's just this, I don't know what it is. There's this magical type of anti-Semitism that has become very compelling, where it's like, you'll see something that is 100% goy, but for some reason we're being like trained. This is really the Epsteinian technology. We're being trained to just see things as Jew coded that have nothing to do with Jews, right? So I don't know. You know what? I'll bite. There's a grain of truth here. I'll bite. It's the Zionist Moishe Postone and the various Frankfurt School Zionists that basically created this. And yeah, I think that's fair to say. They were Zionists for sure. But it was a staunch rejection of dialectical materialism, staunch rejection of communism with a capital C, staunch rejection of I would call it strong Marxism, right? There's a strong Marxism, there's a soft Marxism. The Zionists accepted the soft Marxism. They absolutely rejected strong Marxism. So strong Marxism is Lysenko. Strong Marxism is dialectical materialism. Strong Marxism is the one that defends Marx's work on mathematics, which was 100% true and justified. Marx's work on the derivative, to this day, is vindicated. You want to know something disgusting about... there were some posts that recently went viral where it was like, oh my God, Marx got derivatives totally wrong. He didn't know anything about mathematics. These soft Marxoids tried to like cushion it and be like, no, Marx didn't know about advances in mathematics. But lo and behold, get this, In practically applied mathematics that applies to engineering, that applies to anything that actually involves math, like in the real world, Marx was actually 100% right. And he's only wrong from the perspective of pure mathematics, which doesn't exist in the fucking real world and only exists in the pederastic world of these pederast pure mathematicians that are parasites, that contribute and have done nothing to contribute to humanity. Mathematics as applied to physics, engineering, modern physics, even quantum mechanics, what have you, Marx was 100% right in his mathematical manuscripts. He was like ahead of his time, 100% on the dot. But when it comes to pure mathematics, pure theoretical mathematics, people laugh at him and say, Marx, you are wrong. That's not math. That's not math. Hey, fuck you. Math is what the fucking Babylonians created, not the pederastic Greeks who are raping young boys with their imaginary fart math that doesn't exist in the fucking real world. Our math came from a concordance with celestial patterns that we observed and we started measuring. Okay? That's math. Math is not this invisible abstract thing that comes out of people's asshole. So these pederastic mathematicians and people who believe in mathematics, that's not math. They say they like have this thing. Well, true math is, hey, buddy, you know what real mathematics is? It's up there. You understand? It's in Tian. That's what mathematics is. It's up there. Meaning real math is a reflection of concrete realities and relations and processes in the real world. There is no pure math. There's no such thing. There are smelly farts that you worship and you call this math. And it does nothing but stink up the room. Nothing else. Smelly fart. Your smelly fart world is not the real world, right? I hate this person. It's real hatred. It's real disgust. I hate them with so much fury and so much rage. I hate this sentiment that is behind this disgusting, filthy attempt to bastardize and subordinate Marx to your pre-established bourgeois world outlook. Whitelist, what's up? This fucker disgusts me and everyone who sympathize. Every single one of these people who like the tweet can burn in hell because they're infidels. And they're not allowed in Tartaria. They're going to the gulag. We're sending them to the labor camps in Alaska. And they will be slaves under our system, just not privately owned slaves. They will be slaves of the state, forced to just work on the land bridge to Siberia. They will be captured in nets like in Planet of the Apes. We're going to be on horses. We're just going to capture these people and send them to gulags. But we're gonna bring back the ancient custom of state-owned slavery just for these fucking people and every single person who liked this tweet. Now I wanted to get this out of my system, okay? So let's read what they say. This is literally idealism in exactly the sense look at this, exactly the sense Marx condemns in the German ideology. By the way, the German ideology is the favorite citation for the fake pseudo-Marxists who want to distance themselves from the strong Marxism that comes with Stalinism and Marxism-Leninism. And they believe that in the German ideology, Marx is this kind of, it's the humanist turn that Althusser was disgusted by. In the post-war period, where they tried to say, Marx had a human face. He was this kind of soft guy. He wasn't this angry, brutal, Asiatic Mongol Khan. He was this guy who just loved everyone so much. Whatever. These soft boys who try to create this distinction between the strong Marxism and the soft one. They think German ideology is a vindication of soft Marx, which could not be further from the truth. Instead of starting from the real human sensual experience and the empirical world as Marx wants, you are starting with a derived philosophical model of reality that everything must conform to. So I will very calmly explain why this is wrong, instead of just complaining and being angry at this person, which I very much am. I will actually set about to explain what is so disgusting and wrong and just false about this. Every single sentence is absolutely false that they typed out here. No, this is not idealism. The notion that dialectical materialism is confirmed by scientific discoveries is not idealism. And no, Marx did not believe in starting with pure human senses because he never entertained the notion of pure human senses. But the key thing that contradicts all of this is that real human sensual experience is not the same thing as the datum that Hume identified, which is pure sensory experience. For Marx, empiricism excised the dimension of the human, okay? That's why he called it a collection of dead facts. Marx refers to empiricism as a mere collection of dead facts. Because Marx he uses the word sensuousness a lot in the German ideology, but what people don't understand is this isn't simply the empirical world as described or as upheld by bourgeois scientific institutions. That would be within the paradigm of empiricism and all of its offshoots. In the case of empiricism, everything has to be derivative of neutral observations of sensuous phenomena, right? And that's the scientific method. You test it and you just see, and Marxism regards this as metaphysical. Why? Because it excises the observer from the observed. It takes away from science the process of practical involvement and interrelation with the object of inquiry that the observer imposes. And it's a rejection of the kind of classical Renaissance humanist notion of man as the measure of all things. It tries to kind of bracket the human and regard sensuous empirical phenomena as this kind of radically autonomous substance that is totally indifferent to humanity and totally outside of it, and by no means necessarily interrelated with the human, right? So the purport of dialectical materialism, it's not a philosophical model that everything has to conform to. Dialectical materialism, beginning in the German ideology, by the way, is what I like to call a presumption of resonance. So I'm going to have to get out Microsoft Paint and explain a lot of this shit. But what I call it is the presumption of resonance, right? According to dialectical materialism, in any given inquiry into the the world, and however we regard objects of human sensuous experience, these things must be presumed as interrelated with all other aspects of the human cosmos. They cannot be bracketed and treated as this completely dead fact, separated from the living process of practical intervention or participation in reality. So Marxism has a praxeological orientation. It's based in practice as the criterion of truth, but practice doesn't occur within vacuum-sealed confines separated from the world of man. The world of man includes culture, includes politics, includes art, includes religion, whatever you have you. And there is a presumption that there is a resonance and interrelation of all the phenomena relevant to man's practice and man as a world and as a cosmos. So this is related to the strong anthropic principle, on the other hand, which I introduced to you before, which is that we have to assume that the emergence of humanity is a necessary fact or feature of the universe itself, a necessary outcome of the very nature of the cosmos and the universe, right? But this applies to how we treat the process of scientific discovery, what it means to know something, what it means to regard something as an object of knowledge, or a new discovery or any kind of novel understanding of the world, is that there's a presumption of resonance and interrelation, right? And that is the purport of dialectical materialism, that is absolutely given. And there is no tabula rasa, that you begin from a blank slate. Nope, there is a presumption of resonance. Because if you read the young Marx, if you really read him, he has a specific reproach to the kind of bourgeois Cartesian notion of tabula rasa. And I think this was in his 1844 philosophical manuscripts, where he's talking about refutations to atheism, which are, okay, well, who created you? And then, they'll say, well, it's your parents. And then the kind of religious person will say, well, who created your parents? And then the idea is that ultimately the creator has to be some kind of intelligent being, right? God. And Marx basically regards this as an absurdity, because for Marx, the notion that our existence depends upon some kind of like external, that in order to find confirmation of our existence, we have to believe that it's the consequence of, some other being, so to speak. This is a denial of your own existence in a way, right? And how that applies to the rejection of this kind of Cartesian tabula rasa idea is that human beings are always already embedded in a specific world and cosmos where there is a presumption of resonance, practically speaking, on a practical level. This is the whole purpose of this line of argumentation: who beget you, who beget your mother, your father, and so on and so on. It's like you're always embedded within this inheritance where there is always a kind of presumption of resonance. And that is the foundation of language. It's the foundation of the ability for communication to be meaningful. It's the foundation of history and historical change. It's the foundation of a unified division of labor, a unified complex division of labor, as in an ordered, well-ordered society with laws and conventions and culture and morals and civilization and so on and so on. Without the presumption of resonance, there's no human being. To be human is to presume a resonance. And Marx's favorite motto, this was the young Marx, was in Latin, "Nothing human is alien to me." And that could sum up in one way the presumption of resonance that I'm talking about. For Marx, we can presume, by virtue of the fact that we are human, that the cosmos resonates with our existence as human beings. So I'm going to open up Paint, and I'm going to give you some new concepts and stuff that I've been kind of working on in the background, and try to explain this to you in the best way that I can. All right. So let's call it the principle of resonance, or the presumption of resonance. Let's call it the principle. Call it the principle of resonance, right? Okay. So for Marx, okay, then there's going to be another kind of concept bracketed under this, which is here. Let's call it. I don't actually have. I have a word for it, but I don't know how to describe it in a really simple way. Um, let's call it the resonating. Let's call it the resonating object. I'll just call it that. Okay. Now, the term that I coined for this is the iskra. Okay, the spark. This is what I call it. I call it the iskra. Okay. Now, what is the iskra in the principle or within the principle of resonance, within this kind of cosmological orientation, right? The iskra is this kind of object, so it is kind of exterior to the individual, but which is an object replete with a proof of resonance, right, of some kind, right? So for young Marx, let's just put him right here. For young Marx, the iskra was what? The iskra was actually the total, comprehensive, and integral rational system created by Hegel. Now, a lot of people don't understand exactly why it is that Hegel gives rise to Marx, or what specific debt does Marx owe to Hegel, and why does Hegel lead to Marx, so to speak, right? And the reason is because the Hegelian system, let me just okay, so this is very powerful, okay? You need to understand what this means that I just show you right here, right? And why this is so fundamental to the development of the young Marx, and why this is crucial background context to understand the young Marx, right? The conclusion of Hegel's philosophical system was, and this is what gave rise to the young Hegelians and the kind of more progressive interpretation of Hegel rather than the conservative one, was more or less that all that is real in the world, all determinations within the world are rational. Now, there was a kind of proximity between this conclusion and the rationalism of that is in the background of the Age of Enlightenment and the French Revolution. So you could say it was a kind of hyper-rationalism or turbo-rationalism of some kind, right? But it wasn't the Cartesian rationalism, which simply insisted that all things could be reduced to some kind of procedure of thought, or, that reason could be collapsed into logic, and so on and so on. Hegel develops a processual and dialectical notion of the rational that is based on the interaction and interpenetration of opposites, and the resolution of that interaction, the resolution of these interactions into determinations, right? And so for Hegel, everything in the world, the natural world, the world of the cosmos, the stars, the planets, physics itself, the world of, and then most importantly, human history and the world of society, the world of man. Everything in the world is rational. It doesn't simply mean has a rational explanation. It means is meaningful, is there for a purpose greater than itself. And that is extremely powerful and revolutionary conclusion to walk away with in an era where you're meant to kind of hypocritically ignore the injustices of the world or the contradictions of the world. The world is full of these contradictions which contradict the Christian morality, okay? Seeing a bunch of prostitutes everywhere and homeless people on the street and hungry, starving people, seeing brutality and domination and exploitation and oppression, people under the whip, as Marx would call it, or people being persecuted for taking wood from common forest areas. All of this contradicts the moral sensibilities of Christians, of enlightened people, whatever have you, right? But there is this implicit hypocrisy that, well, the world isn't fair, or, well, the world just doesn't make sense. You're meant to submit and surrender and move on, right? That's kind of how people cope with the world today in a lot of ways, right? But the Hegelian system asserted, actually, all of this is rational. Now, you'd think this is far from a revolutionary conclusion because it more or less amounts, if you think about it, to a kind of like apologia for the existing world. Well, don't worry about the homeless and the brutality. All of that is rational. Don't worry. So, yeah, you'd think that this meant that, this is a profoundly reactionary or conservative notion as a kind of apologia for the status quo. Don't worry about all the injustice in the world because it's ultimately there for a reason. There's a greater purpose justifying it. But the reason Engels said all that is real is rational, yes, but not without further qualification, according to the Hegelian system, is basically that if the world is so out of joint with our innermost moral sensibilities and striving as a dignified human being, then that contradiction awaits further qualification because there's a presumption of resonance. If everything is rational, then everything is rational, which means the horrific deprivation and indignity suffered by man within the world, which contradicts man as the highest of creation, as a dignified being, this contradiction might be rational. This relationship might even be rational. But the interaction between the two awaits further qualification, or at least implies a further development of some kind. And there's something very profoundly revolutionary about this notion that all that is real and all the determinations within being and within existence are ultimately meaningful and form this kind of rational totality. Because there is a messianic implication, if you want to think about it with a degree of simplicity, that all of this means something and will amount to something. All of this has a purpose and has a meaning. Now, these are not people who are superstitious, who are saying, oh, this is all part of God's plan. Don't worry, you're going to go to heaven. No, these are people of the Enlightenment. They're talking about the real world itself, the world we live in here, the world of living human beings, right? And so you see how easy it is for Marx to become the young Marx that we know him as, just from this, right? That if all that is real is rational, that implies something about the future. And there is a kind of messianic hope in that. So that's how the young Hegelians, a lot of them, interpreted the Hegelian system. That it awaits further qualification, and there is hope. And Marx, when he was writing letters I don't know. I don't remember exactly to whom. I think it might have been his wife or Engels. But he was talking about, he's really young. He's like, upon adopting so comprehensively the Hegelian outlook, he was like, I was on the street and I wanted to kiss everyone that I saw, and I had such adoration, and he was like a hippie or something. He loved everyone so much. And this kind of profound feeling of universal love and brotherhood and harmony with the world that comes from the Hegelian system. Okay. And then, of course, we won't talk for now about how and why Marx broke with it, but I want you to understand that for Marx, the way the knowledge of and mastery of the Hegelian philosophy affected him was that it was taken as proof as a resonating object, okay? It became this kind of total object of his existence, which resonated very deeply with these feelings of universal love and brotherhood and so on and so on. So that in this sense, it resonated with, I think, sentiments that all human beings probably have somewhere deep down, right? But in this way, it was drawn out for the young Marx and for other young Hegelians, perhaps. So I'm not going to define Iskra yet because we're not ready for it, right? But then the second part that I think is important, and there's like this is like such a simplification I'm doing ad hoc, right? I just kind of want to get past this part so I can talk about the thing that I think is new, right? Is this idea that there's an absolute interrelation of the ideas, right, and reality. And there's something proto-communist just about this notion and about this sentiment. Because what it means is that we more or less, the striving at the level of the ideal for a kind of completion, for identity, for fulfillment, for rationality, and so on and so on. Note that an idea for a complete human being, not somebody who's bracketing this into some kind of like vacuum sealed system that is divorced from all their other sensibilities and sentiments and so on. From a well-rounded human perspective, ideas reflect our innermost reality as human beings. It's in the realm of ideas that we channel our hopes, our dreams, our sentiments, our existence. And so I'm not using idea in a very narrow sense, right? I'm using it in a sense that implied a much more integrated mental division of labor, if you will, right? But the idea that there is an interrelation between the striving of the philosophy to kind of fulfill the problems at the level of contradictions within ideas and reality itself, that there is this kind of automatic interrelation, that there's a resonance between the ideal and the real, more importantly. This is a proto-communist notion for no other reason that it basically implies that we all share this fundamental reality, this rational world, right? Not even materially, by the way. This is still in the realm of idealism. But we share this kind of rational world. All humanity does, more or less. Which is commensurate and resonates with our individual humanity, right? Our innermost thoughts, more or less, as human beings. So the dimension of the private, of our most, private is what? It's thought, right? Thoughts. I could talk endlessly about how the institution of private property precisely emerges with idealism. Because why? Because there's nothing more intimate and private than a thought, right? And the kind of shared origins of the Platonic idea and the institution of private property are very clear. right? You're creating a boundary. Thoughts are invisible. They're absolutely, you don't, okay, what am I thinking right now? You don't know. I don't know what you're thinking, right? So this is a very intimate, private dimension of human existence, is our thoughts. Our thoughts, and by extension, our dreams, our hopes, and so on. That's what I mean, a very strong notion of the idea that I'm working with here. But the idea that there is a resonance between that and reality, the world that we share at the exterior level, history, the events we experience, nature, and so on and so on. That's a kind of proto-communist notion when you think about it. It basically means that the thing that we regard as so private and individual, on some level, we share with everyone as part of one reality, right? So, how do you get from Hegelianism to communism is not as much of a leap as you might think at first. Hegel might have not been this revolutionary politically, and he might have not advocated. But what is communism in the first place? You need to understand this context and this background, at least as it concerns Marx and the young Marx, right? So Marx, I would say Marx regards the entirety of the Hegelian system, right, as this single resonating object, which I will call Iskra, the spark. And why am I calling it the spark? Because it doesn't become Iskra until it's separated, until there's a separation from, let's call it let's shape it like the Anglo box, right? Let's just call it the ideal. What else can we call it, right? So, this is so schizophrenic, whatever. Now, upon the conclusion of the Hegelian system, which is Hegel's philosophy of right, at the end, or at the beginning of the book, if you will, in any case, Hegel punctuates his totalizing integral rational system in a way that, politically speaking, contradicted the sensibilities that it otherwise inspired in the young Marx and other young Hegelians, actually, right? Hegel drew very profoundly conservative political conclusions from a philosophical system that, at the outset, inspired revolutionary feelings and sentiments in the young Marx and in the young Hegelians, right? But the reason for that is that Hegel has to reckon with how he relates the conclusion of his system to its premises. And it's this move of taking the conclusion, which is this kind of resonance of the ideal and the real, and, you know, this total, comprehensively rational system of reality and of thought. He has to reckon with the premises the conclusion necessarily implies, right? And for the right Hegelians, and maybe for Hegel himself, but that conflict, by the way, of what premises, so the conflict, let's put it, post-Hegelian conflict. What premises do the conclusion Hegelian this is where everything goes wrong, right? And then from here you get the young Hegelians and the right Hegelians, right? And of course, Hegel himself in the philosophy of right. Maybe you could say Hegel concluded as a right Hegelian, right? But the premises implied by the conclusion are what Marx would later develop as the alienated essence of man as an ideal, as an ideality. And I don't want to go through the whole chronology of how Marx arrives at this through Feuerbach and his specific critique of Feuerbach's humanism and so on. But more or less, the reason Marx has to turn Hegel on his head is because Marx refuses this conclusion, right? He refuses the conclusion and thereby the premise, really. He thinks something must have been wrong from the start, right? Trying to like simplify this as best as I can. Marx more or less concedes. I don't think this is very explicit in Marx, but in my interpretation, I think Marx conceded to the right Hegelians this conflict, right? That the premises that the conclusion of the Hegelian system imply and that conclusion being the definition of this resonating object, right, that is created by Hegel through this system, that's the conclusion, this kind of all-encompassing total phenomenology of mind. It's an extremely comprehensive system that Hegel creates, and it's very much internally consistent, right? So it would seem, right? Of course, Marx points out the internal contradictions in his critique of the philosophy of right. But in any case, the premises more or less imply the how should I begin? Beginning with I want to be very careful with my words here. That's why I'm kind of struggling to simplify this, because the simplest way I would put it is what Engels described as the Hegelian system with the universal descends to the particular. Engels. Begin with the particular to begin with the particular, then ascend to the universal. And then this is also very much shown. What's the symbol for this? Fucking arrow. Where the fuck is this arrow thing? Right here. Ascend to universal, rising from the abstract to the concrete, right? So that would be one way to describe the premise, right? But it's really the conclusion. Okay, do you want to know the actual conclusion simplified? It's basically that this, because it was developed through thought, is just a thought or an ideal. Because the system develops through Okay, so I've got precisely what I can say to simplify this. Um, because the system through the thought ideal and their various interrelations, the resonating object secreted by it is necessarily itself simply a thought, idea, etc. So this is basically the conclusion, or this is the premise. Hegel's conclusion was taken as implied necessarily, right? That because the system develops through thought and ideas and their various interrelations, the logic of their interrelations, so on, that the resonating object secreted by it. And what is this object that I described? It's this very vague kind of affect within Marx and the young Hegelians of I don't want to sound retarded, but it's like, this kind of feeling of universal love and resonance and harmony and rationality and this kind of messianic hope that's implied by it, and so on and so on. And the Hegelian system kind of concludes in a way where that kind of gets erased, right? It kind of gets erased, and you end up implying a premise that contradicts the conclusion, insofar as this conclusion is this kind of ephemeral resonating object, what I call iskra, right? So the question is, how was Marx, first of all, and this is really the first premise of Marxism as a whole, the most fundamental premise of Marx and Marxism and Marx's materialism and his humanism and the rest. Well, what Marx did was somehow isolate this, right, from this. He was somehow able to distill the essence of a resonating object from the very system that I call secreted it. Does that make sense to any of you? Does it make sense to any of you at all what I'm trying to say here? For Marx, put it this way. Let's put it this way. I'll try to make it more sense for you, right? For Marx is reading and mastering Hegelian philosophy. And while he's doing that, he hears a specific melody and a song in his head, right? And it's a beautiful song. It's an extremely beautiful melody and an extremely beautiful song. Okay? But then at the conclusion of Hegel's philosophy, there is a wrong move that implies a premise which fucking ruins the entire song. It ruins the whole thing. And if you want to think, if I can keep trying to explain it in terms of music. Have you ever heard a song and there is such a harmony and beauty in it, and you're like, oh, I could see where this is going, I see where it's going, and then there's a bad note that fucks it up, and you're like, this was nothing like what I thought it was, right? And it's like suddenly it wasn't the song you thought it was, but the whole thing got fucked up, and it led to something very ugly, right? Well, Marx was somehow able to preserve this kind of integral, totalizing, rational kernel. Fuck, I mean, he himself used the language, okay? He talked about how there's a rational kernel within Hegel's philosophy. I'm like trying to think of the fucking term to describe it, and then I'm like, oh shit, Marx himself used the term, the rational kernel. That's what it was, okay? If you can also say that a resonating object is a rational kernel, right? So the question is, how was Marx able to preserve this, right? How was he able to preserve this at the expense of accepting all of the premises and the terms of the very relations that secreted for him this resonating object or rational kernel, right? So it's as if you hear this beautiful song, then at the end there's this shitty, awful note, which changes your entire perception of the song in the first place, right? So it's like, how can you preserve the memory of that harmonious, beautiful melody in a way that comes at the expense of the actual song itself? Does that make sense to you at all? Because now when you re-listen to the song after the bad note, you think of it differently. You can't just simply say, okay, I'll cut out that part. No, after you've heard that part, it's ruined for you, right? But for Marx, he was able to preserve this rational kernel. Well, the reason I can, it's not the goal of this specific lecture to kind of go through this completely, but I could just say, Marx he does it through Feuerbach, man as the concrete reality of so he does it through Feuerbach, and Feuerbach's kind of critique of religion. And there's a line of development. I'm not just saying Marx just listened to his heart and that's how he got communism. No, there was a concrete kind of development of various different intellectual currents, which Marx very faithfully synthesized in a way that allowed him to preserve this rational kernel of Hegel's system. And so what becomes of Hegel for Marx? Okay. So let's just talk about this, okay? After all is said and done, Marx's humanism, materialism, etc., which begins from having presumed, taken as given, etc., okay, so when all is said and done, and not to rehash the entire history of the young Marx, which I could do elsewhere, but I won't do now. How do we begin with Marxism as a science? Now, I want you to keep in mind what this person is implying. This person is implying, let me find this right here. Yeah, this person is implying that you can begin from real sensual experience and empirical reality. So, retard Marxoids. You can just begin from empirical reality, right? And that's the problem. You can't just begin from empirical reality because of this. Because how Marx arrived at his materialism in the first place was presuming and taking as given a kind of presumption of resonance, right? And this is the only thing that establishes the meaningfulness of Marx's materialism in the first place. Because Marx's materialism, right? Marx's materialism implies a material resonance between the loftiest, highest achievements of philosophy Okay, that's the problem. And the interrelation between these, right? The interrelation between this and this does not fit within empiricism. This goes beyond what empiricism permits. You can't arrive at this conclusion by putting on gloves and putting on a lab suit and trying to dissect the empirical world in a way that is separate from all the other aspects of our existence as human beings, right? You can't simply take a magnifying glass and observe, I don't know, rocks or something, and then arrive at the conclusion that Marx does when it comes to this notion of a resonance between the macrocosm and the microcosm, right? Between man, including the loftiest achievements of whatever, these things that belong to the superstructure, and man as a real concrete existence, his mode of production, his material way of reproducing himself, his actual existence, his actual real essential material reality, right? The notion that these things are interrelated in a way that is not necessarily direct, but which implies a resonance, right? The notion that these are a reflection of that cannot be justified by the investigation of reality in a vacuum-sealed empiricist way, by treating all the different determinations within the world as dead empirical objects. You can't arrive at this conclusion only by presuming an interrelation, only by taking objects necessarily as a given, as suspended in interrelations of some kind, right? Is it possible, maybe, right? And you can see the resonance. So I'm not even saying it's impossible for scientists to discover what Marx took it for granted. Of course they can. Ray Peat did. Plenty of other scientists. Many scientists become Marxists because of this. But you can't just begin by through empiricism. You cannot. You can't begin from empiricism. So the question is, what are the real premises of Marxism? I mean, Louis Althusser was very interested in this question because he was interested in the question of, to what extent is ideology just unavoidable? Should we just concede that ideology is unavoidable? There's no way to be purely scientific. We're always contaminated by an ideology, right? It's basically Althusser's whole shtick. And what I would say is that, first of all, let's take seriously more this notion of Iskra, because it can be expanded. And it doesn't end with Marx. This is kind of one of the reasons I really wanted to do this stream and explain this. Instead of the young Marx, let's have Lenin. Okay? Now, this is the second example I'm going to give, right? Which will be much easier than the other one. because it involves much less philosophy. And this is actually going to, I hope this will clarify the lecture to you guys. It'll be far more simple now, right? Going forward. Including, you'll understand what I was trying to say with Marx as well now, right? Who is Lenin? Lenin is a pretty cool guy, okay? Well, it's not the point. Lenin is someone who obviously comes from a background of people who are revolutionary. His brother was killed by the Tsar. His brother was involved in revolutionary activities. There were certain things that predisposed Lenin to have revolutionary sentiment, for sure. But how can we explain Lenin's acceptance of Marxism and his attachment to Marxism? Dark, what's up? Why did Lenin become a Marxist specifically? What made Lenin so attached to Marxism? Now, a LARPer or a liar will simply say, how did the begin? They simply investigated Russia and concluded Marxism was correct. So this would maybe be the official notion, the official explanation. Wrong. Absolutely wrong. Rather, Lenin was inspired by the Second International and the very large, prosperous, up-and-coming history and contemporary significance of German social democracy and the social democratic movements that existed within Western Europe. The truth is, Lenin began as a Kautsky fan. And this is a truth. This is true. This is absolutely true. Lenin began as a fan of Kautsky. So, and he was also kind of, I won't say envy because it has negative connotations. So, in the beginning, Lenin actually was sort of ambivalent toward Russia, very much admired the West as more progressive and more enlightened, because he was a fan of Karl Kautsky, the Second International, German social democracy, and this phenomena, okay, became Lenin's resonating object. So he's witnessing this foreign exterior phenomena, and for him, it secretes a resonating object, okay? Which I will call Iskra. Again. So, what Hegel was for Marx, the reality of social democracy was for Lenin. In terms of secreting this comprehensive, phenomenological, resonating object. And does anyone know what followed? Does anyone know the story of what comes after? Well, something very curious, right? The same thing. Somehow, Lenin, what does he do? Does anyone know what comes next? Same thing Marx did. He somehow, even though despite the fact that was secreted through the development He was somehow distill its essence in a way that freed itself from these origins. Social democracy. Does this make sense to anyone at all? Do you understand structurally how it's the same as Marx for Hegel? It's the same fucking thing. Like the same exact thing, more or less, right? Structurally. It's the same exact thing. Now, the song, so in this case, what's the song? I want to test you in case you're understanding. What is the song in this case that ends with a bad note? What's the song? Nobody's gonna, only one person? All right. All right. Yeah, okay. Good. Yeah, the song is the story of social democracy. Okay, it's like a hymn. It's like a hymn of social democracy, right? And it ends in a bad note, but a bad note that should ruin everything, right? Something was wrong from the beginning. And yet, in the same way in the case of Hegel, something was wrong from the beginning, for sure. But Lenin was somehow able to distill this resonating object, or iskra, this spark, from the conclusion. It's like this secreted this by accident, and then was cut off from it, right? So if I asked you to fill out this structure of the principle of resonance and iskra for the young Mao Zedong, how would you fill it out? Shouldn't it be obvious? Okay, instead of Second International, German Social Democracy, you're going to have the Soviet Union and Stalin and the USSR, right? It's people's... Guys, I'm trying to explain a kind of epistemology or ideology theory of Marxism of like, how does it actually, and what are its real origins? Like, how does it actually emerge, right? I'm trying to describe this common structure across the development of Marxism itself, where you don't begin with blank empirical senses or an idea. You don't begin either with an idea or blank empirical datum. You begin with a presumption of resonance, with a principle of resonance of some kind. It can be Hegelian philosophy that gives form to this resonance, or it could be the very phenomena of social democracy and the Second International, which gives form to this resonance. But nonetheless, it's this fidelity to this fundamental rational integrity of being, which I call iskra, or a resonating object, which is the true premise. It's not a tabula rasa. But then, okay, so as I began this specific thing with Lenin, like how, if you went back in time ex nihilo and you tried to repeat Lenin's steps, walk in his steps, could you do so without the Second International and German Social Democracy? This is the question that Lars Lee asks in Lenin Rediscovered. He says no. He says to retread Lenin's steps, we have to go through the principles of social democracy again. And that's actually the premise of the MUG club in the DSA and Donald Parkinson. It's what they believe. And I think these people kind of miss the point. You don't actually need to reinvent the wheel, but you need to know what the wheel is, so to speak. What is a wheel? The closer you get to understanding what a wheel is, the less time you have to spend reinventing it. And actually, some people argue the same thing with Marx. They say in order to understand Marx, we have to relitigate Hegelian philosophy, and we have to become Hegelian philosophers. And that's actually a very prominent viewpoint in academic and philosophical circles, Marxist circles, right? Amila, thank you so much for the 10, right? No, it is sublation. Guys, of course it's sublation that I'm talking about. But I'm talking about something more fundamental than mere sublation, because I'm trying to kind of define this. I'm trying to I want to understand the real subjective premises of the revolutionary outlook. And I think the real premises of the revolutionary outlook, I have this kind of Gnostic idea that we all have a spark within us. And when there's a resonance between this internal spark and some kind of object, resonating object, right? We establish a kind of cosmic alignment. And that there is a path you can pursue to maintain fidelity to the alignment. Amila, thank you so much for the 10. And really, this is the truly scientific thing, because a presumption of resonance, any assumption about the terms of this relation, about what they are, or even the form of this relation itself. The only presumption is that it is aligned with inner sense of the rational This is truly scientific because it destroys any attachment have to specific claims about the empirical world. If we can be at peace knowing there is a So, do I have to read this to you guys? Does this make any sense to you? This is real science, right? This kind of presumption of resonance. Because when you have this kind of cosmic understanding of there's a presumption of a cosmic alignment between the macrocosm and the microcosm, you now can be open to any conclusion because you still understand there's a rational integrity that does not need to be specifically confirmed or verified by any specific proposition. And that's very important. It doesn't mean it's given in the sense that it's like this metaphysical dogma. It's almost kind of like understanding of practice, right? What he meant by the theoretical anti-humanism, a lot of people misunderstand it, is that when you deny a specific the understanding that our a priori embeddedness in practice, material existence, etc., frees us from having to answer some I don't fully agree with Althusser. You guys know that, or you should know that about me by now. But the presumption of resonance is it's like similar to what Marx talked about in that thing with the atheism I talked about earlier. It's like, well, do you need confirmation and verification that you exist? Do you exist? Do you deny your own existence? Do you deny the fact that you're already embedded within a cosmos, that you already exist, that you already live a certain way by virtue of, like, is it simply an accident that you're alive? Is it random? And I know it sounds very like mystical and vague what I'm saying, but it's like, think about it from a broader perspective. The fact that you're breathing and alive right now implies a lot of things. It implies a complex division of labor that you depend upon. It implies a specific type of society. It implies a specific type of law, specific conventions, specific norms that you can rely upon, that your neighbor is not going to come into your house tomorrow and kill you or whatever. It's like there's all sorts of things that your existence itself implies about reality. And we can take it on a broader level, like at the level of the natural world, with the strong anthropic principle that, well, your existence also applies a specific nature of the cosmos and the universe that gives rise to the existence of human beings and you, right? So, no, Iskra is not God. Please don't say Iskra is God. Please don't say Iskra is God. Holy shit. You're really missing the fucking point if you're going to walk away with that conclusion. Very, very false. And so this kind of presumption of resonance, if you want it to be in plain spoken language, you know, without the woo-woo bullshit, I guess, is really this kind of presumption that that our reality and our existence is by virtue of a specific relationship between labor, you know, practice / labor, and this iskra, this kind of affect, this kind of, to whatever limited extent it may come to us as an idea or something else, some kind of whatever, but it's like inspiring vision, a dream, a hope, whatever you will, a religion, whatever compels us and motivates us to fucking get up in the morning. Like, it could even be anything. It could even be fear that you're scared you're gonna get shot or beheaded by some fucking feudal landlord or some shit. Whatever that so happens to be, it's the relationship between that and actual real practice that defines our existence. and that there's a resonance between those two things, and knowledge of that resonance is scientific. And finally, we don't have to split hairs wondering if, the conclusions of philosophy are aligned with our practical existence. We don't have to be anxious about the question of whether our practical existence could ever possibly align with our ideals or our thoughts or our philosophy. Some people call that a utopia, right? Well, no, there is automatically an alignment and a resonance between the two. We just have to know what that is and be responsible for it, because it's already there, right? And that's basically the purport of Marxism. In a way, when people say Marxism is this attempt to make reality concordant with your ideals, why stop at ideals? Why not hopes and dreams and thoughts and feelings and all these other kinds of things, right? But Marxism doesn't want to collapse the two into the same thing. Marxism asserts that there's always already a resonance between these two things. And that's the kind of cosmic principle that underlies Marx's materialism. And that principle of resonance is very much beyond the scope and beyond the bounds of what institutional or bourgeois or empiricist or positivist science would permit. I mean, look, can I just be honest with you? I am very bored from Heidegger. I don't like Heidegger that much. I think he's a stepping stone. I think he's an important stepping stone, but I also find him to be a profoundly boring thinker. And I don't feel like I want to do a stream about Heidegger because I just want people to understand, what problem he was reacting to. But I can't really bring myself to be passionate about giving a lecture about Heidegger when I find him so boring. I don't think fucking Heidegger is the fucking key to everything, right? I just don't. I think there's something else that's the key to everything, and it's not him. He brought us back within Western logos. I fundamentally disagree with that. I think actually Hegel did that. I think what Heidegger did was raise a important question in an age where the development of the mental division of labor had basically forced the question of being onto us, where before it wasn't actually forced. It was actually something we could imply or take for granted, right? Hegel presupposes being. I disagree, actually. I disagree. I think that's reading into it. I think that's the Hegel that you have to, there's the, what's these fucking, who's that like analytic philosopher Hegelian? Post-Hegelians have to do that. Post-Hegelians have to do that, right? What's Robert Brandom, is that his name? The analytic philosopher Hegelian? It's Brandom, right? Post-Hegelians have to kind of answer that question of by what did Hegel mean by what being was implied by Hegel? What did he mean by being? But Hegel proper, for Hegel himself, I think actually harmoniously is opening being to logos. He's not foreclosing the question of being. He's not deepening the forgetting, so to speak, right? I actually don't think that's true for Hegel at all. I think for post-Hegelians, yes. But for Hegel himself and for pre-Hegel, even for Descartes, Heidegger was wrong. And Lacan is the one who proved that. Heidegger was correct against the philosophers of his age, but Heidegger was absolutely wrong about classical, or neoclassical, I should say, Western philosophy, I think. But in any case, let me try to shout. Okay, so now, given this kind of vague introduction to this principle of resonance, I want to ask you guys what should be a obvious question with an obvious conclusion. What is the iskra for us? What is that for us? Many of you will overthink it. You say China. Well, close, but there's more for sure. 1770s. Can you guys, one person kind of got it and you're all farting in a disgusting, smelly way. I just fucking can't stand it. Just shut the fuck up. It's just like awful. These awful. Yeah. Well, Jay Manu, you got it pretty. It's the entire. Yeah, Denver Hoja. Fucking congratulations. The one guy who actually got it. Denver Hoja is the guy. Yes, it's the experience of 20th century communism. Okay. That's what that is for us. And this is more comprehensive than social democracy because it's not just a philosophy, as in the case for Hegel. It's not just a movement, as in the case of social democracy. It's entire civilizations, it's cultures. It's like, it includes, yes, an outlook or a philosophy, if you will, an ideology or a series of ideologies. It's like it's like an entire integral totality of existence, human existence, that is external to us, right? And naive, realist, LARPer mistake. Let's just begin from American conditions and derive ex nihilo, tabula rasa, American socialist movement, right? So many of you make this suicidal mistake, which I find fundamentally arrogant, which is this idea that, we can just ignore this, right? We can ignore this, but you lose this too, right? You don't address what is the iskra, though. What is the resonating object? Because you do that, you end up no different than the empiricist right here, right? You don't understand that there has to be this kind of. You don't understand that there has to be like this radically. There has to be a confrontation with our alienation with the resonating object or with iskra, right? And suppressing that Yeah, look, the problem with, you know how many fucking people, like, literally turned their head inside out and just, like, became fucking autistic retard LARPers who defected from our movement and who were like, you know what, I forget all this, like, infrared, forget all this, like, commie stuff. I'm just gonna be a Americanist. And they're like, I'm just gonna be a patriot for America. Our wreckers, the anti-party wreckers, were on the same retarded bullshit, right? The problem is that it's a fundamental dishonesty. All you're doing is suppressing your origins and denying that you got to the conclusion of wanting to derive concretely the resonating correlate or the concrete, fuck, why am I fucking losing the words here, right? The concrete mirror or correlate of Iskra, the resonating object. You want to know what it's like. What does that concretely look like in America if we apply this inspiration I'm getting from 20th century communism? How would that look like in America? Now, on the one hand, it's correct to understand that would be radically distinct from these foreign experiences. But when you suppress the inspiration itself and simply think that you can now just start tabula rasa as an empiricist, then you're committing a fundamental mistake. Because the whole point of a resonating object is what signifies or what would be the word, or communicates the resonance between an image, idea, philosophy, word. It could be a word, right? It could be thought. The two, it is a resonance and not identity, okay? So this is what Iskra is, all right? And we have to embrace the foreignness of communism, because otherwise, when we try to collapse the distinction, you don't get the resonating object. You don't get Iskra. You lose the principle of resonance. Instead, what you get is something very hideous, right? Which is LARP. You're directly trying to be the thing instead of discover how indirectly, through the sublation that we're talking about here, the thing in its essential reality, right, is concretely realized in a way that comes at the expense of the very form which secreted the resonating object. So for Marx, this was the proletariat. The proletariat for Marx, if you read his introduction to the critique of Hegel's philosophy of right, is the genius soil of the people, the ingenious soil of the people that renders the Hegelian philosophy superfluous. So for Marx, it was Hegelian philosophy that secretes the resonating object, but Marx discovered the concrete reality of the proletariat to be the very thing that renders this superfluous, right? He discovered in the proletariat the kind of concrete reality of this resonating object that he was inspired from Hegelian philosophy, right? I just feel like I'm speaking in vain. Like, I feel like, be honest, like, does anyone fucking understand anything I'm talking about? I don't fucking know. How does the proletariat, yes, maybe just ask questions if you don't fucking get it, you know? How does the proletariat relate to Hegel? Because Marx basically, from Hegel derives a notion of the rational integrity of being that resonates with an inner sense of human dignity that seeks to find confirmation in the world. So in the same way that you have a crush on a girl and you love her so much and you want her to love you back, you know, you want the resonance. You have this feeling, this, you know, you're writing her poems, dear Agatha, you're my, whatever you're doing, right? But you have this kind of feeling in your heart, right? That's within you, right? And the whole point is that you want to establish this kind of resonance by having Agatha or whoever return your feel, and thereby you find confirmation of a resonance, right, that you seek. So that doesn't just apply to relationships and stuff. That applies to everything, literally everything, the entire universe, right? So in the case of Marx, he was inspired from Hegel's philosophy with this kind of understanding of the rational integrity of being, that everything is rational, everything is interrelated, and there is a harmonious relationship between the philosophy that, you know, that, as Epicurus said, is developed on the basis of kind of curing this suffering of the mind. There's a resonance between that and reality itself, which includes history, which includes nature. So, Bismuth, do you at least understand this first part about why Hegel is important for Marx? Okay, so the thing is, for Marx, the proletariat is the concrete determination of the very truth, the essential truth, that he grasped from Hegel's philosophy, which was a truth that could not be contained within the philosophy itself. So Marx kind of is inspired by this a certain kind of disposition, if you will, from Hegelian philosophy. And then the simple question is, well, what's the truth of it? What does this all actually mean? And then Marx goes, aha, the emergence of the proletariat in modern society, a class that is not a class that has nothing to lose because it's already lost everything, a class that has been reduced to the most fundamental attribute of a human existence, which is labor, right? It owns nothing except its labor. This class, this new class that's emerged for the first time ever in history, the proletariat, this is what punctuates Hegel's philosophical system. This is reality itself responding, or maybe that's not a good word. This is reality itself taking shape in such a way that heralds a meeting point between the truth of philosophy and the reality of the masses. Remember, the masses, who are crushed under this seemingly like irrational existential position, propertyless, living in slums, having nothing to sell but their own labor. But it's precisely this like apparent meaninglessness, this monstrosity, this abomination. Marx says, no, this actually heralds something very promising about the future, actually, right? It heralds communism. It heralds the emergence of, for the first time, a class within civil society that truly represents the universal interests of humanity, because it has nothing and can only assert its interests by, asserting the interests of all mankind. But how it relates specifically to the Hegelian philosophy is that it's this notion of the rational integrity of being, right? And interrelation. So I don't know if I've explained it to you at all. If that makes any sense whatsoever to you. Okay, John Adams, please just stop trying. If you don't understand, just don't understand. You get it a bit. No, it's actually really hard to explain. Basically, so Hegel's system, underlying Hegel's system, is a logic. Okay, let me explain it this way. This will be a way to simplify it. But I'm struggling to simplify things, so bear with me here. Hegel's system, it gives form to a logic. Okay, it's underlying it is a specific logic, right? Okay, for Marx, that same logic is proven as a logic of society by the emergence of the proletariat, right? The existence of the proletariat implies that Hegel's logic isn't just something that is replete throughout the development of his philosophy, but is also given expression by the development of modern society, right? The notion of a class which is not a class, and the specific understanding Hegel gives, actually, of the concrete universal, right? Or the universal through the particular. Marx identifies the proletariat as this kind of universal subject, this universal form of humanity, which, as a class within civil society, represents only the universal interests of all the society, right? And so Marx identifies a kind of structural brilliance in the very material existence of the proletariat. I don't know if that makes any sense to you at all, but that would be how I simplify it. Although I'm really not satisfied with that explanation at all. Like, I even think it's kind of not true. that's a kind of classical Hegelian Marxist reading of the proletariat. But yeah, the reason you zoned out is because your attention span. It has nothing to do with the content of what I said. No, Carlos Marx is it's a lot more than that. It's not that they're a concrete expression of Hegel's logic, it's that they're the concrete reality of what Hegel was trying to describe in the estranged philosophical form, right? The thing about Iskra is that it's a primordial kind of principle. Okay, so when Iskra reached the minds of the Greeks, they turned it into an ideal. The reason they did that is because they heard a song, they thought the song was so beautiful, and they tried to capture the essence of the song by reducing it to something, right? And that was their mistake. Because what the song should have done is inspire them with a greater sense of appreciation for the harmony of the cosmos. And if that's what it did, it would have inspired them to discover this kind of chiral opposite of the form of the song itself, which is what? Content, right? And they would have discovered a kind of way in which that very song itself is itself resonant with reality in ways that are not reducible to the song itself or the form of the song, right? So um the Marxism as dialectical materialism, although, and maybe this is really just Marx's beginning, rising from the abstract to the concrete when you think about it, which is what Marx tried to do at least. But he never completed it. That's the other thing. Should be in writing. All right, yeah, I guess I'll just fucking. Bro, can you just shut the fuck up? I know it should be in writing. It's just like, what do you, I'm here right now. I'm trying to fucking explain it to you people. What do you fucking want from me? Notice that whether it's Marx in relation to Hegelian philosophy or Lenin in relation to the history and reality of social democracy, although they began from this kind of intangible inspiration, by discovering concretely within reality the essence of those things, they were able to sublate them. And that is really the key to understanding Marxism as a science and dialectical materialism. You don't begin with an empirical object. That would be the same thing as the mistake within Marx's schema of beginning with the concrete, which is impossible, right? You have to begin with the iskra, the spark. That's all you can begin with. And you discover how material reality is primary after the fact. And this puzzle, I don't think Marxists understand with sufficient appreciation. You can't begin with pure science. I mean, Althusser was correct about this, to be honest. I don't agree with Althusser, but he was like definitely on the right track, identifying these false presumptions about that Marxists had, which is, oh, you could just have this pure science, pure knowledge, right? And pure knowledge of what is true or what is false. And it's like, well, there's always this dimension of what Althusser wrongly calls, I think, ideology, but is definitely this kind of like intangible object, for sure intangible, that I think is the premise of revolutionary consciousness and Marxism as a science itself. But science begins when you can distill the essence of the resonating principle within that object, that iskra, right? And free it from the form which it takes for you. And that's what Marxism begins doing, as early as Marx's inversion of Hegel, right? Could the spark be something similar to feeling a sensory experience? It has to take a form. For sure, it has to take a form. So I don't think it could just be a pure feeling or a sensory experience. It has to be a kind of like comprehensive object. I don't know if I would say like the Kantian object, absolute object of apperception or whatever. Free it from its material confines. No! Free it from its ideal form. Or free it from convention or habit or formalism or whatever have you, or dogmatism. But no, the opposite. It's not that you're freeing it from its material confines. It's not like you're using it as a weight, as a measure of the materially real. It's like your compass. It's like the thing you're using to discover the material, right? As a reference point for which knowledge of the material becomes itself possible. So no, you're not freeing it from its material confines. Because the formal confines are not material. That's precisely the point. That's precisely the entire mystery, right? It's a process of discovering what it actually is materially. But to discover what it is materially requires a radical, how should I put it? A radical autonomy of this kind of resonating object from its ideal or dogmatic or theoretical or institutional premises. So Marx maintained a rational kernel of Hegel while rejecting the idealist premises of Hegelian philosophy. And Lenin retained the rational kernel of European social democracy while rejecting the institutionalistic, dogmatic Eurocentric premises. And the same is true for Mao with regard to the USSR and the Comintern. So that's really what I'm trying really desperately, and it's really hard for me to talk about here. And I actually thought it would be a lot easier for some reason. I really thought it would be a lot easier. Like, I had it all mapped out in my head, like, so whatever, well, like earlier today. And then as soon as I start up the stream, I'm like, actually, fuck, this is really hard to explain. Yeah, and now we're doing that ourselves with 20th century communism. And that's our task, right? And this is how we remain in the lineage of the revolutionary dynasty, right? Guys, I don't want us to fall into mysticism and obscurantism. I want us to be clear or have a lucidity and clarity of what we're trying to talk about and say here, right? You're just elaborating Marx's idea of the rational kernel. I kind of am, but at the same time, I'm problematizing this. Let me show you. I'm problematizing this identity of Marxist science with empiricism, because Marxist science begins with this inheritance, this burden, and this debt that world history imposes upon us. This intuitive comprehension of reality as an integral, rational totality. And that is something that we've had since the beginning of time, okay? All societies have had this presumption of resonance. Even if it took a superstitious and mystical form, it doesn't matter. These were just the language. This is just the language that was used to give expression to it. But underlying that was a rational kernel, right? And this kind of presumption that there's a rational kernel to human society and existence and civilization and history cannot itself be justified by bourgeois science or bourgeois empiricism. And that's really what I'm trying to say. All right, guys. I'm not doing a stream like this again for a very long time. Can you dumb it down for me, please? I can't. I've been that's what I've been doing the entire time. I've been dumbing it down. I've been I've been struggling in anguish trying to dumb it down, right? Then don't dumb it down. There's so much shit I wanted to talk about, and I just got so tired because of how fucking late it is. But this idea of Iskra, which is a new concept that you'll see it feature in my writings that are coming up, but bro, John Adams is pissing me the fuck. Like, I'm getting fucking triggered, bro. Come back tomorrow. Like, I don't want to fucking deal with this. Fucking annoying fucking emoji. Like, literally, I don't want to see that fucking face right now. I don't even remember what I was trying to fucking say. I really don't. I don't even remember what I was just fucking saying. Holy shit. Let me try to remember. this fuck. Yeah, I know Iskra, but what was I fucking saying? Mordor, thank you, bro. Appreciate it. So, this idea of the Iskra that I tried to give 2 examples for, or 3 examples for, right? Which I thought would clarify the structure I'm trying to kind of give expression to better, but apparently not. This is where we would typically put ideology or idea, right? Or that's where Althusser would put ideology. But my objection to the premise that it's necessarily an idea is that ideas and ideality imply self-relation. So an idea is a self-relation of thought. Ideas have identity with themselves. They have self-same identity, right? Whereas I think that Iskra is more this kind of inceptual principle whose relationality to what it relates to is actually much more radically open. And it's this kind of spark which appears to us or affects us from without. And what it actually corresponds to and relates to, only after the fact we say it's an idea, right? It's a self-relating thought. It's a self-relating idea. It's an identity. So this is its definition. It's this specific definition. But when we do that, something gets lost. So, and this notion of the Iskra, I think is helpful to understand how the concrete totality of material existence, whether it's a mode of production or a historical era or something else, the way that we can relate to that through consciousness is that, remember that thing I said about how it's lighter than a feather? That's what it is. That affects us as this kind of extremely fragile resonance, right? And a very simple resonance. And how you interpret that post hoc is where everything becomes decisive in the sphere of consciousness. But if you allow the relation of how the concrete appears to us, how that appearance relates to reality itself, if you allow that to remain open, you can establish a praxis. You can establish a relationship of the thought. And I kind of even hesitate calling it a thought. I think it's a more fundamental kind of it's a more fundamental like being itself that just affects us, and it can appear to us as a thought. It can appear to us as an image. It can appear to us as an inspiration or Um, I think the song thing, like, you kind of understand what I'm talking about, where it's like when you consume art, for example, there's something more you experience than the form itself. Hence why a bad note can ruin an entire, you experience something in that melody which is more fundamental, right? We don't even necessarily have, I think, the proper vocabulary or word to describe something like this, right? Um because uh our immediate instinct is to call it an idea, but I think that's wrong. I think that's too presumptuous, right? If you call it an idea, then you're assuming it is a thought. It is a self-same thought, right? It's a thought with an identity, a thought with a definition on the terms of thought. But there are some affects we experience which we cannot reduce to definitions of thought to thought, right? These are things that can only be defined by more fundamental kinds of experience and activity than just thought, right? Yeah, Iskra is not the empirical, not the ideal, and it's not simply what kickstarts the scientific process, but it's the inceptual principle of revolutionary consciousness more generally. How do you get the masses to Iskra? Um, well, it's very simple, actually. You just have to establish the resonance. The masses feel a certain way, and to make rational sense of those feelings through engaging and communicating with them in a specific way, that's what Marxism traditionally was supposed to do. It was supposed to make rational sense of their disposition, a more fundamental disposition that the masses had, such that the masses could look at Marxism and say, aha, now I understand my entire fucking life struggle, and I understand why I feel the way I do about society and the state and reality. And that's actually how Marxism functioned for a long time. When workers read Capital and they learned about Marxism, it actually did spark something that were like, I knew this all along, I just didn't have the language for it. That's what resonance is, okay? I want you to understand what I mean by resonance. That's what it is. But Marxism doesn't have that function in America anymore, right? And, that's why Marxists will talk to workers and it doesn't resonate with them. You see how resonance is such a beautiful, simple word that it's like so useful, right? It's like, does it resonate or does it not resonate, right? But what is resonance? It's very important to think about. And what I'm trying to say is that the resonance is more fundamental than the terms of the resonance. And that's the truly scientific view. So some people, and you have to have that view because for some people, Hitler's Mein Kampf resonates with them because maybe they read in Mein Kampf, I was in jail. And then somebody who maybe went to prison was like, oh, you know what? I relate to Hitler so much. That resonates with me. And they then project wrongly a lot of their experiences onto Nazis. And that's how a lot of people get roped into the kind of Hitler, fan club, whatever this new thing is, right? And if you can just distill the resonance itself and bracket the terms, then you will free people from their attachment to Hitler and give them a more unconditional confidence in the fact that their humanity and their existential position and, dare I say, their feeling is rationally commensurable with the world they live in. And in a way that makes sense of their existence and makes it meaningful. I hope there's some usefulness in this lecture for you guys. I'll self critique and say I should have prepared more for it, because I just thought it would be so simple and be like so easy to explain, but take away something, you know. Anyway, guys, I will see you, I hope, tomorrow, but I'll let you know. Maybe Thursday. I hope tomorrow. I actually want to stream tomorrow, though. Texas, what's up? If I caused you some mental pain and anguish, then it's good. That's all I can say. If you struggled, it's good. Because at least it's got your gears turning, right? But, Captain, what's up, man? Appreciate you. But you guys want to notice something interesting about Marxism? Marx's Iskra was the Hegelian philosophical system. But the proof of the brilliance of Marxism is that it itself became part of the Iskra. So you can say Hegel was an accident, and then we had Marx. But then Iskra for Lenin was social democracy, which is part of the history of Marxism. And then Iskra for Mao was the USSR, which was a further development. And then for us, Iskra is 20th century communism and maybe China and so on. So there's this recursive process in which Marxism itself participates in becoming part of the world concretely, and thereby part of the very principles that inspire us to adopt the revolutionary consciousness. So it's almost a kind of dynastic lineage, but within the realm of consciousness itself, right? But that's why lineage is so important. You can't step out and say, I'm just a neutral person. I'm gonna pick up sand and rocks outside and put my lab coat on, and that's what Marx meant, just to be an empiricist. No, I mean, no, fundamentally no. No, because what you're missing is Iskra. And what Althusser would say is that, what you're missing is ideology. I'm not going to say that. I don't think it's ideology, but it's definitely something. Keep that in mind. It's definitely something. Like, you know how Althusser says you cannot be outside ideology, right? I'm saying the precondition for having any kind of there's so much more I wanted to say, actually. So much more I wanted to say. Because the whole point for me that I couldn't fucking remember to say, really, why did Marx regard the proletariat as brilliant and as the concrete of Hegel's philosophy or whatever? Because idealism regarded as primary the ideal, and the metabolism of the ideal, right? That was just the work of the idea. So the worker in this scheme merely fulfills the vision of the architect, okay? And that the material world is just this kind of gesticulating process by which the ideal is given form in becoming. And Marx radically inverts this, and by stating that no, the ideal is just a reflection of the material. And in this way, the how do you put this? If you want to understand in utilitarian sense, you have the ends and the instrument, right? The instrument, it's just merely the instrument to realize the ends. Marx kind of is in proximity to this like revolt of the instrument as the real site of dignity. And the ideal is the mere reflection. And so the question is, what gives integrity and unity and, let's say, universality to the material or to the proletariat, the working class? Because workers are just a bunch of individuals and so on, tangible, empirical beings. And there's many ways Marxists have tried to cope answering this. And certainly, Marx himself was trying to resolve this question in his attempt to rise from the abstract to the concrete in the writing of Capital. Marx believed that if he finished Capital, it's basically like discovering the Philosopher's Stone. He thought that would be how he proves that it's in the material reality itself that the rational integrity that idealism regards are given primacy only by ideas would be proven. And he didn't finish Capital. So we're left with a much more interesting reflection and understanding about what was Marx actually trying to say. And my kind of take is that Marx implied a dark Plato, a material Plato, a Scythian Plato, right? Zoroaster, right? That there's an underlying principle that idealism misses. So this is what puts everything in proximity with Heidegger, with the notion of the forgetting of being through the inception of logos, to give a bone to Emila, I guess. But that's why I engage with Heidegger and Dugin and so on. It's because Marx didn't finish Capital. And the thing Marx really discovered was that idealism was wrong, not because it asserted the integrity and unity of reality, which Marx agreed with, by the way. He regarded reality as concrete and idealism as an abstract kind of thinking. But the way in which the concrete totality of being and existence affects us and how it relates to us via consciousness and thereby conscious activity, right? And this is relevant for revolutionary praxis. So not an idea, and not ideals. So what? And this is where you kind of get the interesting question of, in search of a dark Plato, Iskra. This is what I call it, kind of materialist notion of the idea. The thing that gets things going. So that's also Lacan's, I would call it Jacques Lacan's object A. But that would confine me to a specific kind of clinical therapeutic paradigm, which I reject. Catalyst, yeah, for sure a catalyst. Between Hume's datum and Plato's idea, there's something else. This is what I'm trying to say. Anyway, guys, I hope it's some food for thought. I really gotta end the stream, though. Bye-bye.